Welcome back to another video. My name is Derek, and today we're going to be taking a look at this MSI GeForce RTX 3090 gaming graphics card. There's a small issue with it, and I'm going to show you how we fix it. Let's get into the video. Backstory behind this is somebody was repairing their computer, and in the process of transporting it, going up a flight of stairs, they dropped it and they damaged the 8-pin connector. They attempted to repair it themselves, they weren't successful. I'm going to show you how we do it, and mainly what I'm trying to convey is how simple it can be to do a solder job like this. So let's get started. Alright, so here we have the graphics card. As you can see, we clearly have missing one of these 8-pin connectors. These connectors have pins that are through hole, which makes the soldering actually quite simple. We'll flip this over and we're going to take out all of the screws. Now we'll gently pop off this plate, just like that. The only thing really holding it down at that point is the heat sink. Now we'll take these 4 screws out and we'll set this aside. We'll want to disconnect on the sides the connectors that go from the fan unit and heatsink down to the motherboard on both sides. Now I'll carefully take the logic board and we're going to slowly try to pop it off. All of the heat sinks will be holding it down, but it'll slowly come away like that. Now we got the card unit out and you can see where the connector broken off. Now luckily this type of repair doesn't need a microscope, so let me show you how we take care of this real quick. Alright, so you can see now the pins and all of the flux that was attempted to be used. We'll clean that up, the first removal. Now we're going to need a few things for this repair. One of them is going to be a flux wick. I've got some 138 solder paste and some 80 and some 6337 solder wire. Alright, the process is going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to apply some flux. I'm going to take some of the 138 solder paste, get out my soldering iron. I've got it set at 380 degrees Celsius. And I'm just going to take the solder paste and we're going to mix it with the solder that's on the board. And this is going to lower the temperature that the solder needs to get to release the pins. You could use hot air if you really wanted to. I'm just showing you how to do it with a soldering iron this time. You could also use a solder sucker, but it isn't necessary as well. And what will happen is you'll be able to kind of just put the iron on top of it and push it through and give it enough time. And the heat from the iron will transfer into the solder and the pin and it'll kind of drop. It'll make it easier to grab and pull out. Then I'm going to take a pair of tweezers and I'm going to come in from below and grab onto the pin and then melt the solder on the top, and then the pin will just pop right off. The pins that are going to be the hardest ones to get out are going to be the grounding pins. Alright, one other way we can do this, it's quite simple, is I'm going to get out a couple of my Omni vices so we can lock this in place where I have enough space under it for the heat gun. We're going to turn on our hot air. I'm going to come in from below and we're going to warm up the area, wait for things to start to melt. I'm going to take some solder paste from the top. This is the 138. It's going to help lower the temperature a little bit more. And then I'll be able to gently wiggle the pins out, just like that. Wiggle, 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 and it'll pop. Wiggle, pop, wiggle, 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 and it'll pop out. And the last one, wiggle, wiggle, and it'll pop. Now what I'm going to do is we're going to take a soldering iron and some wick. We're going to try to suck up as much of the solder as we can. It won't all come up with just an iron. We're going to take some flux and some wick. We'll come in from below with some hot air and from above with the iron and the wick. And we're going to try to absorb all of the solder out of the holes. This is where a solder sucker could come in handy if you had one. If the wick becomes too saturated, you just swap it out with another one. As you can see, that's pretty much all solid of solder now. More wick and more heat. Now is the perfect opportunity to take some isopropyl alcohol and a Q-tip and we'll clean up the flux. I'll flip it over and do the same thing, and I'll just clean it until I'm satisfied. If you've done this right, what you'll end up with are beautiful clean holes there. So what we'll do now is we'll take our new 8-pin connector And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take each one of the pins and we'll slide it into the flux here. And that'll kind of coat the exterior of the legs in some flux. This will help the solder transfer to the pin itself and travel all the way through. Do that on each one of them. And then we'll do the same thing on the board. I'm going to apply a good amount of flux inside the holes and I've pushed it down with the connector. And one of the nice thing about this connector is it's got these little plastic clips. So when we go to slide it in, and normally these little plastic clips would slide into the holes, but these ones that were sent with it aren't wide enough. They should be on the outside edge here. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to just clip these off, which just means that this connector will need to be a little bit less. All that means is this will just need to be babied a little bit more when using it. And what's quite nice when you slide this in is these pins stick up quite a bit. Now all we have to do is take our soldering iron, and what we're going to do is we're going to apply some solder to each one of these legs. And as we do that, and as we add some solder, the solder should flow all over the leg, through the board, and to the other side. Now the thermal mass of this board is quite high, so it may take a little bit more heat. So in a second we're going to use our hot air to assist in the flow through the board all the way to the other side. I just want to make sure there's enough solder to work with on each one of these pins. We'll do that on each one of the pins. We'll add some flux and we're going to make this look nice and pretty. I'm going to put a reduction nozzle and we'll heat it up and we'll flow the solder all the way through the board. So before I finish this, I just noticed something very interesting. This new connector was supplied by the owner of the graphics card and it's upside down. The pins are obviously the same, but as you can see, this one should look like these two. So this won't work. The clip needs to be on the bottom here like these ones, even though these ones are a little smaller of a clip. But also the little angle cutouts of these need to be on the top side, not on the bottom side. So good news is there's a whole bag of them. Bad news is I'm going to have to extract the pins from the connector and turn them around and put them back in. That's going to be the hard part. What I found is if I take some wire cutters without snipping it and I put some leverage on it, I'm actually able to get them out. The only issue is when I do this, I end up, even though I can get it out, what ends up happening is the side of it becomes really almost like etched to where it's not going to easily go back in. Alright, so I got them all out, and because they're now kind of serrated on the edges, I think it's going to be quite difficult to push them back in. I'm going to give it a try, but I don't know how lucky I'm going to be. Alright, so the short ones are going to need to go opposite of this one, so they'll be on this side. Let's see if I can just push straight down. Oh, that is tough. If I do a little bit at a time, oh, that gets tough, but I think I can do it. Maybe try hammering it for a second. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to try to just destroy one of these so I can get at the pins without bending them or scratching them. Just going to cut one to pieces, or maybe I can heat it up and extract them hot. Let's try that. Get nice and toasty. Melt the plastic a little bit. Oh, and it slides right out. Just like that. Nice. That's a lot easier than pulling the other way. Alright, let's see if I can just slide this in now. This isn't serrated. Oh, I'm kind of able to push it a little bit in. Maybe with the assistance of... Okay, it's sliding almost all the way in. Give it a little... Alright, about the right height. See if it'll go that smooth for the rest. It feels like it. Alright, there's those 3 done, or 4 done. Let's move on to the bigger pins. And the hammering is working as well on this side. That's about the right height. Let's double check. Yep, that looks good.
Now you can see that it lines up nicely with the other one. So now I'm going to get out a blade here. I'm going to try to gently cut off as clean of a cut as I can, these little pegs. We'll do the same on the other side. This one won't go flying across the room, hopefully. And we'll see how well this is going to go. I've got some really thin super glue here, and what I'm going to do is would take the little peg that we cut off, and we'll do the same on the other side. A teeny bit of that glue on there. It's not perfect, but I think it's where it's supposed to be, or close enough. Now I'm just going to add a teeny bit of baking soda. It'll interact with the super glue. And the science behind super glue is pretty neat. The channel Veritasium put out a pretty detailed video on the history of super glue and how it actually works. I think it's worth the watch. Alright, now that we've been able to completely reverse the direction, let's go ahead and install this one now. Alright, let's remove the connector that we just installed. Add some flux to help things flow a little bit better. And we'll pull that through. We'll suck all the solder up and we'll do it all over again. Alright, we've got the holes cleaned out again. We're going to take our newly made connector and we'll stick the pins up and through, and hopefully I've lined things up with those little plastic brackets so they'll pop right through, and they did. Alright, now we'll turn on our iron, take some flux, and we'll solder them on down. Alright, now that I've got the solder flown through where I want it, we can clip off the little bit of excess that's on these. Watch these go shooting across the room. Just like that. And then I'm going to come in with my soldering iron and we'll just freshen up the top of those solder just to make them look a little bit better. And then with some isopropyl alcohol, we'll clean it on up. Alright, and now we finally have the connector looking like the others with the same design. Alright, now that we've got that connector looking really good, looks like I've got a little bit more flex to clean up here just to make it look a little bit better. That being said, we can now put this back together. The owner is going to be installing some new thermal paste, so I'm not going to worry about that or connecting back up the little flex cables. Go ahead and line it on up. Make sure none of the flex cables are pinched, and we'll screw it on down. The thermal paste on there was pretty fresh. Not that it'll be spread properly, but it might run just fine. Now we can take the rest of the heatsink, we'll line it on up, and we'll put all the screws back. And now it's pretty much good to go back so that they can finalize their computer repair. Alright, that's how to fix the connector on a GeForce RTX 3090. Mainly I wanted to show how to solder through hole joints, so hopefully you learned something. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. If there's something that you'd like to see in a future video, let me know as well. Thanks a ton for watching. We'll see you in the next video.